Minister Sheikh Hasina ending her 15-year-old regime in a very, very dramatic manner, almost succumbing to pressure from the people and as well as the Bangladeshi army, which reportedly gave her just 45 minutes to tender her resignation. Military chopper was ready. She fled the country and is reportedly landed already in India.
Basri, this is unusual for several reasons. Not only domestic, the continuity of her being the longest serving head of government around the world. And of course, the whole fact that during her tenure, Bangladesh had also been promoted as a Bangladesh model of economic development. And for India, as you're saying, the reports are that she most likely has landed in India. This would present a very unusual test for our diplomacy and politics. Only about 2 weeks back, India's External Affairs Minister was in Dhaka and detailed discussions happened. And as far as the protests were going on, and the comment from Ministry of External Affairs was that that is an internal issue. But the fact that Indian External Affairs Minister was there just in middle of these protests, and now the reports about the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina having landed in India would also make it a kind of a testing times for India's diplomacy and India's politics. But the very, very, I think, difficult situation for Bangladesh domestically. Now, whether they will have military taking charge of the running of the government, or they'll make some kind of caretaker government under the president, right. I think we're all waiting for the chief of staff addressing the nation, as I understand.
Absolutely, absolutely. Question goes to you. First of all, let's get a clear picture, try to understand what does it mean. The army chief said that I will be heading an interim government. Now, he said this immediately after his meeting with all political parties. They described it as an all-party meeting that the army chief addressed. That was immediately after Sheikh Hasina left the country after quitting. Now, what does it mean when the army chief said that he is heading an interim government? What does it mean? Can we? I asked the same question to Sri Radha. Can we call it as an army coup, or you don't think so?
I'm inclined to agree with Professor Sri Radha Datta that it's likely that military will reflect on it, and armies have lately become little cautious of intervening in politics around our region particularly. But it is also equally true that once military takes over charge, even as an interim or caretaker government, then the generals have found it difficult to really step out and discontinue that kind of exercise. That is again the kind of experience we have had in our region. So in that sense, this could be that if the army chief takes over even as the caretaker government, we don't know how long that would continue. And a final very quick point, whether we call it a military coup or not, it's difficult to believe that simply the protesters minus some kind of cooperation from military would have been able to achieve this. And Bangladesh has seen, I'm told, about 29 military coups so far, I mean, successful or unsuccessful. Right. So I think military definitely had a say in what happened, and whatever has happened, we are still discussing what has happened.
Okay. There are more breaking stories. We'll bring you those breaking stories. But Dr. Swaran Singh, the army chief describing it as a revolution, and you know, the entire agitation was formed by a little known group called the Students Against Discrimination. Students Against Discrimination. Now, do you think it is possible for such kind of an organization to lead such a massive protest that leads to the ouster of the Prime Minister, forcing her to flee the country? Do you see that there is more than what meets the eye?
I think you are indicating in a very correct fashion because we have known Sheikh Hasina Wajid as a very strong leader, longest serving Prime Minister, with several both positive and negative commentaries about her. And apparently we did not see immediately any possibility of she being replaced by any other leader or political group, even if there were insinuations about the last election being rigged. But suddenly House of Cards falling like this with students protesting.
So Dr. Swaran Singh, Dr. Swaran Singh, do you think, can I ask you a blunt question? Do you see a foreign hand at this point in time? Do you think it's an internally organized movement, or do you think there could be outside elements supporting some of these groups?
I'm not sure if I can think of any external hand, though, protesters had underlined her being close to India. Even earlier, there have been, protests in earlier such major protests saying that they wanted to, for example, in 2011, they were saying they wanted to save Bangladesh from becoming puppet of India.
Yeah.
That kind of insinuation has been there, but I don't see that there is any possibility of foreign hand. I think it is the military, and particularly when you saw the
Yes.
army chief immediately calling it Kranti and kind of revolution.
Prime Minister actually leaving the country in that helicopter. Let me go back into history a little bit on, Bangladesh got its liberation in 1971, which we all know. 15th of August was another black day in Bangladesh's history, 15th August 1975. The entire family of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman were killed, assassinated, and at that time, Sheikh Hasina and her younger sister Rihanna were visiting Europe, and that's how they are saved. And at the Indian government at that point in time, the government of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi gave Sheikh Hasina and her sister political asylum in India. I'm talking about 1975. Dr. Swaran Singh, this time around, we are getting reports, as we have already said, that Sheikh Hasina has landed in India, whether it is in Agartala or whether it is in Kolkata, that doesn't matter. She is eventually, apparently, I'm using the word apparently, headed to New Delhi. So do you think this is another case of India giving political asylum, or I may use the word or not, I don't know. Please clarify on that. And there are also reports that she will be eventually heading for London.
I think, Basweer, it will be important at this stage to be cautious and wait until we have firmed reports of her being in India, her being in New Delhi, or her going to London. Things are changing, I'm sure, on hourly basis. And even on this whole idea of a foreign hand, I think we should be rather cautious, particularly if there is a likelihood of India becoming the center of entire episode unfolding itself. And in case it is true that she could arrive in New Delhi, and India then has a major responsibility to, ensure that some kind of solution is found as soon as possible. A caution in that sense would be most important. And as far as we are seeing pictures of, Bangabandhu's statue being attacked by masses, I think this is simply the mass fury that happens. We have seen increasingly around the world people losing control and doing things that one would not anticipate civilized people doing. And I think then in that case, onus again or responsibility again goes with the armed forces in Bangladesh to make sure that, the property damage or life and property of people is protected, and that the damage therefore is not just to a symbolic statue. I'm sure this kind of violence can go out of hand, and therefore the focus has to be immediately on controlling as soon as possible. And I'm imagining that these protesters were only wanting the Prime Minister to resign, and apparently she has done so. I don't see any reason now to continue protests, and I think they should come to a halt, and army should kind of intervene and make sure that they explain to them that you wanted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to resign, and that has happened. Why are the protests continuing?
Right.
And I think, again, to me, again and again, I think I become a bit of conscious of what may be role of armed forces, an army chief himself,
Right.
who
Right.
gave a detail, the kind of a
Right.
press.
Let me-
Just
Dr. Swaran Singh, as Dr. Surya said, India-Bangladesh relations thrived under the premiership of Sheikh Hasina. What is the road ahead now? Do you think it's a big challenge for India at this point in time? Because when we say our neighborhood first policy, we have a difficult relationship with China, we have a difficult relationship with Pakistan, Myanmar, it's a blow hot, blow cold kind of a situation. There is total unrest in Myanmar. Nepal is also politically an unstable country. Bangladesh was the only country that was stable as far as India's neighborhood was concerned. So India was banking very heavily on Bangladesh. Now, what is the road ahead according to you?
I think it is true that India's very positive relationship with Bangladesh was quite clearly anchored around the personal bonhomie of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Sheikh Hasina Wajid, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. You would remember even during the pandemic period when not many leaders were flying around during the 50th or I think 100th anniversary of Bangabandhu, Indian Prime Minister had made sure he visits Dhaka. So in that sense, yes, there is a possibility that if this exit of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is going to be kind of a permanent exit, that would surely impact India's relationship with Bangladesh. But primarily also because apparently there is no clear leader visible right now who could be replacing Sheikh Hasina Wajid as a national leader. Khalida Zia has been a kind of out of scene in terms of visibility. She is also 78 years old now. But in case army takes over responsibilities and heads the interim government, India has also learned over a period of time, and next door neighbor Myanmar is an example where India has also learned how to deal with the military junta if they begin to control the running of the government. So there will be little, I think, turmoil, little challenge that India would have flowing from this instability in Bangladesh. And as you mentioned, there is a sort of top level meetings are taking place in New Delhi to understand it and deal with it. But far bigger challenge, I think, is the one for Bangladesh and the people in Bangladesh who would have to now, find another way of ensuring stable governance and economic development and so on. There is an apparent vacuum at this stage, and that is what makes me see if there is a political vacuum, then very likely the military is likely to either be requested to take over or would step in on its own. Which could perhaps ensure some kind of visible stability there. But in the long run, I suppose democracy had a certain amount of roots despite all these kind of boycotts we had seen from BNP and Awami League having thumping majority, as you mentioned, 288 out of 300 last time, which was suspect around the world. Several agencies had said that this was not a kind of a clear, fair and free and fair election. But nevertheless, I think the bigger vacuum, bigger challenge now lies to Bangladesh itself, and India being the largest neighbor and very, very respected country around the world would be expected to step in and play a role in ensuring certain amount of stability and peace, whatever way it can happen. And in that sense, things are still unfolding. We are now hearing she's going to London. How long she will be in India, what that means for India and Bangladesh relations, whether she will be in London for longer period of time or is there any possibility of her coming back sooner or later. We have seen leaders in Pakistan going away, to Middle East and then coming back after some time, even after a decade. So I wouldn't completely rule out Awami League and Sheikh Hasina Wajid as a chapter closed. But I think you have to be very careful and cautious as things unfold minute to minute and hour to hour right now.
Right. Dr. Swaran Singh, now, you see, this is how the rule of the world's longest serving female head of government ends. This is dramatic. This is not the scenes which we saw of the protesters storming the Prime Minister's official residence reminded us of what happened in Sri Lanka 2 years ago. The protesters storming the presidential palace there and the president fleeing the country. Now, what does this mean of politics in South Asia?
I think there have been, of course, several allegations of corruption and all, and investigations could come out with all kind of things later. But these protesters' behavior in Prime Minister's office has no reflection on Sheikh Hasina Wajid. These are criminals that invariably intervene and take advantage of situations like this. And it happens around the world. In all protests, any protest that continues beyond a couple of days, these kind of elements start taking advantage of situations. And I wouldn't say that these are serious protesters. I mean, if they had a real problem with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina Wajid, they would not destroy Prime Minister's residence. That still belongs to Bangladesh. That still belongs to those people, whoever becomes the next Prime Minister.
Yes.
So this is disgusting to see that people allow such criminal elements to enter protests, and protesters should be responsible for making sure that a certain amount of decency is maintained in all these things. And property destruction is destruction of your own property. It's Bangladesh property.
This also, Dr. Forensic, this also suggests that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had sensed the mood. She was absolutely escaped the country at the nick of time. Anything could have happened to her. The security forces could not protect the Prime Minister's official residence. So it was quite likely that had she not left the country, or had she continued to remain within that official residence, her life could have been in danger.
Sorry, Basveer, for a change to deviate from what you were saying. I think it is exactly the reverse. I don't think Sheikh Hasina Wazir, as Prime Minister, thought she would have to run like this. In fact, the food laid on the table and all these things is an example. I also understand from media that she at least wanted to, give us some kind of a speech and address the nation before leaving. And even that was not allowed, and a military helicopter being used.
Dr. Suran Singh, I have a breaking story, and I'd like to thank you very much for joining at this such a short notice in this special broadcast.